This
time,
conference
when
will
he comes
now
across
be
a wet floor,
recorded.
he will be taking a more careful action because he has learned it from the experience. What he will do is that he'll either try to avoid that wet floor, or he will walk slowly instead of running in that wet floor to avoid falling on the floor. Okay, so he has learned, as a human being, he has learned. So learning requires intelligence, and so that's why we say that machine learning is part of artificial. Of course, artificial intelligence, by its definition, is what all the intelligent activities we want to do it through computers. That is the basic idea behind artificial intelligence. Machine learning here is whatever learning that you have to do will be done by the programs. Okay, so let us see now. Nowadays, artificial intelligence means focuses more on the learning part of artificial intelligence, because it has been found to be useful in the world. Therefore, we will concentrate upon a particular branch of artificial intelligence called as machine learning today, and we'll discuss some topics within this area of machine learning. So machine learning means, of course, as the name indicates, the learning is done by the algorithms which are there in the machine learning, and they enable some better decisions to be taken because of learning, right? So let us see what is the definition of this machine learning. So machine learning is part of artificial intelligence. Nowadays, artificial intelligence means it is focusing more on the latest topics of this machine learning, and one more later development in machine learning called as deep learning. So on these two topics, the current world is focused with respect to AI. So now I'm giving you a topic of this artificial intelligence called as a machine learning application by a neural network called as Adeline. In the process, I'll also introduce you to some concepts about what is machine learning, and you'll be getting to be familiar with respect to what machine learning is about at the end of this particular chapter, as well as you'll be seeing one game playing game, which is the machine learning application which we are going to discuss, and which is implemented by a neural network called as Adeline. Okay, so let us go to the next slide. You can remove the slideshow if you want. Okay. What I do? So let us see the machine learning definition. The machine learning definition is written here as the computer program learns from experience. So just like the child has learned from experience of slipping on the water for the first time, and during the process he has learned something. So experience is required. Experience means we basically mean to say that the program will learn from data. So that is data is experience basically, and some class of tasking. When you are doing a machine learning solution, you are obviously aiming at doing a task, right? Whatever it is, whatever is the task about, you want to do the task well. And we wanted to do it with the help of machine learning. You want to do the task well with the help of machine learning algorithm. And there is a performance measure P. Then machine learning criteria is that if P, that is performance measure, improves with experience, your performance should increase. That is, as you are exposed to more amount of this training data, your performance should improve. That is what is the definition of machine learning. Right? So on that task, your performance should improve with more experience. So more experience means with more data. Your algorithm, which is implemented by program, should be exposed to that training data, and the performance of the algorithm should improve. So that is the definition of machine learning. And We are going to see one such task in this particular chapter. And we are also discussing about some fundamentals of machine learning in this particular chapter. So let us see what sort of applications are there. These are some of the successful applications in the machine learning. For example, learning to recognize spoken words. Like, for example, you are speaking to the Google and it is able to interpret your words and act on your sentences for your search. Whatever you're asking it to search, it's doing it. It is responding to your voice command. So learning to recognize spoken words. This is one successful application. Learning to drive autonomous vehicles. This is done by Alvin system. Autonomous vehicles means where there is no driver. The machine learning program will take care of the driving function and it will make the vehicle drive across the road safely. Okay, so today you might have heard this Elon Musk Tesla is concentrating upon this driverless cars, autonomous vehicles. That is one of the focus areas of this Elon Musk company called Tesla. Even Google is working on this automatic driverless vehicles. Google, though it is an IT giant, it is also working in this area of the autonomous vehicles. So we hope that sometime in the near future, we are going to have these autonomous vehicles on the road, where you can now you might be knowing that the aircraft, there is something called as auto mode in the aircraft, where pilot will be relaxing, he'll be putting it on auto once he's on the air, and it may go in the auto for a couple of hours even before he finally has to come out of auto, say for landing or something, right? So such possibilities of autonomous vehicles on the road could be we could be seeing sometime in the near future. And one such vehicle called Alvin system was demonstrating using a neural network this autonomous driving in the US roads. The Alvin system is about driving a vehicle about something like around close to 100 miles without causing any accident, and it was able to do that. Further, it has used a neural network and a camera for receiving information to the neural network. A neural network will be turning the steering wheel. The vehicle was driving at a constant speed. And so it was able to drive in the US roads for about 100 miles, this Alvin system vehicle, right? Vehicle controlled by Alvin system was able to drive for about 100 miles safely. That was done many years back. In fact, 20 years back it was done. Then you are having this NASA identifying the astronomical objects and classifying them. For example, in the astrological space, you are having a lot of astronomical objects. Okay, so for example, you have meteors, you have galaxies, you have planets, stars, so on and so forth. Identifying all these things is another task which has been done by NASA by using a machine learning program, which is with an algorithm called as Bayesian trees. Playing backgammon is another game which is played by the machine learning algorithms, machine learning programs. Playing chess. And one such chess program was the Deep Blue, which was implemented by IBM and which was able to beat the world champion at that time by name Garry Kasparov. He was beaten by the Deep Blue program, which is having artificial intelligence and machine learning. Okay, so these are the successful applications, some of the successful applications. What I would suggest to you is to Google and find out what are the top 20 machine learning applications, you can say, and find out more about these applications. They'll give you understanding about what are all the ways in which machine learning will be useful to the world and what sort of algorithms are relevant for those applications. What are the algorithms which are used by those applications? You'll be coming to know. And that will be giving you some kind of a practical motivation to learn about this AI and machine learning. So now before I go further onto this machine learning, I just wanted to give you one suggestion with respect to learning any subject of computer science, especially AI and machine learning. So your attitude should be that what is important, whether it is theory or practice, which one is important? Because some people are the more focused on theory. Some people are more interested in writing programs and doing something practical, which is important. Let me give my answer for this question. So for any learning, both are important, but theory is you have to consider first. Understand the theory well, and if you are able to understand the theory well, then you go to the practice. And you take whatever you understood in theory to the practice. For example, in the case of AI or machine learning, you may have to implement an algorithm to solve a task. First, understand the theory of that particular algorithm. Then later on, you should go into some programming language like Python and start implementing that particular thing for solving a particular machine learning problem task. This way, you will be connecting theory to the practice, and that is the way your learning will become very good, and you will be developing expertise in that area within a reasonable amount of time. Okay, now let us discuss one problem machine learning application called as checkers. Checkers is a game, and it has got some rules, so which was actually played on chessboard only, and so it has got some types of some types of things are there. This one, and so this checkers game, suppose you wanted to, it has got some rules which are different from chess, and so it has got queens, it has got kings, it has got another player, this one, so called soldiers. So this kind of checkers game you would like to play, but you would like your machine learning algorithm to play and be competing in the world tournament. That is your gameplay program written by machine learning
Galaxy
program should be competing in the
actually
world
my
championship.
father has brought it, madam.
So this playing checkers, how
Yes,
are you
madam,
going
I want to
to
cancel
play
it. I paid a amount also.
task? One is that you are concerned about the percentage of games won against opponents, because that is the way you can measure that your program is playing competently. How many opponents it has won? Based on that, you would like to introduce into the into the world championship. If it is successfully playing with opponents and winning against them, then you would like to introduce into the world championship. And yours, since it is a machine learning program, the training experience E, that is more amount of practice games it plays against itself. It should be able to learn how to play better. That is, its performance should increase of winning against opponent should increase with more amount of play against itself. So it will play against itself, the program. It will play for both the players. Checkers is a two-player game. It will play for both the players, and in the process, it will improve its experience. And from that, it will learn. Okay. So this task will be giving the experience to the playing against itself, will give experience to the program, and its performance to play against real opponents should increase. Okay, so this is checkers learning problem which we would like to solve in this particular chapter. Then one more problem which you will be hearing in machine learning is the handwritten recognition problem. So here they are having handwritten words and you have to recognize them. So a word is given, say New York, or what called some other word, right? So these words, English words, you should be able to recognize and say what is that word meaning and all that. So this is handwritten recognition problem. And the performance measure for this particular task is percentage of words correctly classified. If you are able to recognize the handwritten word correctly, then the performance is that indicates the performance measure. How many words you are able to recognize correctly, from the set of handwritten words. Then training experience is that you will be exposing the algorithm to a series of these written words. By exposing it to the algorithm with a series of written words from which it it tries to classify, it is exposed to this training experience. So this is a supervised learning. So each word and what does it mean will be given to the algorithm from which it learns. And later on, when it is actually asked to look at some handwritten word, it correctly understands what is that word, right? So this is handwritten recognition problem. Then the next is, how are we going to design such a learning systems? So we have seen two learning systems just now. How do you design a learning system for the first one, that's playing checkers? To make program play checkers in the World Checkers Tournament, that is our objective. So you are going with the task defined. You want your program to play in the World Checkers Tournament. Okay. Then how are you going to train? That is, you are going to give experience to your program. How are you going to train the program with how are you going to give experience to it? One is that you can tell to the game playing program of this checkers game playing program, each state you show, and what is the from that state, what is the correct move. This is your, as a tutor, you are guiding the checkers program and telling it from this board state you should make this move. What is the correct move from this board state? This is where this is called as direct training experience. So direct training experience is one way of doing it. Like somebody tells you how to solve a mathematical problem in school, right? That is direct training experience. Indirect information is it will be given the information of move sequences and final outcomes. That is what it will be, how it will be generating indirect information. It will play against itself and either win or lose. That is the checkers game playing program, which is using machine learning algorithm, will play against itself and observe. It will finally have two possibilities, two or three possibilities actually. The game playing program may win, or it may lose, or there may be draw. From all these three possibilities, it's supposed to understand supposed to receive experience, but this is indirect experience. So from a series of moves which it is making, finally it is able to see an outcome. Either it is winning, or it is losing, or there is a draw. From that it is supposed to learn, right? So this is called the learning with indirect information, where the program plays against itself. For two players it will play, right? So from the point of view of the two players, it will learn. One player will win, one player will suppose loses. Then from both the point of views, it will be learning. The game playing program will learn. So this indirect information gives the problem of credit assignment. The credit assignment means degree to which each move contributed to final outcome. See, for example, if you're playing a chess game, you will be ultimately be losing, but you will be playing 3/4 of the game very well. Then 3/4 of the starting moves you have done very well. Then somewhere you made a mistake while playing, and because of that mistake you finally lose. So which move contributed to the final outcome? This is called as the credit assignment. Because some of the games, some of the moves will be very good, and some of the moves will be poor. So which move has contributed to the final outcome, or the degree to which each move contributed to final outcome? That is called as credit assignment, and that is difficult to do that for an indirect information. Okay, so the credit assignment problem is there whenever you are exposing, you are training the algorithm by playing against itself. So we are having these two possibilities: direct training experience and indirect training experience, where the algorithm game playing program plays against itself. Then let us see something about how we are going to choose our learning strategy for the game playing program. Teacher might provide board states and with correct moves. This is direct training experience. Learner proposes board states and teacher provides correct moves. This is also direct training experience. Learner learns by playing against itself. The third possibility is indirect training experience, where learner learns by playing against itself. So we follow the third strategy in the application which we are going to design, which we are going to discuss next. So another fundamental concept about this machine learning is the distribution of training examples. So training examples are required for supervised learning. In fact, the experience that we are giving to the machine learning algorithm is coming from training examples. So how should these training examples be chosen? That's the question. Training examples and future test examples should be from similar distribution. So this is the fundamental requirement of machine learning. So both training examples and future test examples should be drawn from the same similar distribution. For example, you know the sine curve. The sine curve, when you plot it, so it will go from 0 to maximum, say 1. Then it will come back to 0. Then it will go to -1. Then it will go back to 0. So it is having a positive part, sin x function, as well as there is a negative part. So training example should be drawn from throughout the throughout the sample space. If you take only positive examples and try to predict the test examples from the test examples values for the negative part, obviously you'll fail. That means training examples and future test examples should be from the entire data distribution. They should not be from different parts of the data distribution. So that's what the first example. This is a very fundamental requirement of machine learning. And if you don't take samples properly, like for example, in the case of sin x example, which I told you, you will not be successful. In the case of sin x, for example, if you take samples from both positive region as well as from the negative region of the curve, right? The training example should be from both. Test examples should also be from both. Then you will be successful. If a learner learned by playing against itself, then it might encounter novel board states when playing a human champion. Now, we are asking our machine learning agent to be able to learn by playing against itself. That is, we are asking this machine learning program to learn by playing against itself. Then it is exposed to moves made by itself. Then it may not be knowing what to do when encountering a novel board state when playing a human champion, because it will not be exposed to other human beings. It is only playing against itself. So that could be causing a problem when playing against human champion. That is one difficulty which we anticipate when you are asking it to learn by itself. It will not be able to know in advance what kind of moves the human beings, some particular human being will be able to play. But we'll stick with the strategy of indirect training experience for now and go ahead how to design such a machine learning program with some machine learning algorithm which are going to specify. So we are looking at this implementation of this design of this checkers learning program. Checkers learning problem, we want to solve it with this. So its task is to play checkers. Performance measure P, which we want to improve with experience, is percentage of games won in the world tournament. Training experience is games played against itself. So using this context of this what called checkers learning problem, we want to demonstrate whether our machine learning program is able to increase in its learning by using a machine learning algorithm, whether it's able to play more competently after playing against itself for some number of games with a human. Ultimately, it is to face a human champion in the world tournament, right? So we want the learning to be done automatically by playing against itself. That is the way in which we are asking it to be trained. So let us see how to do this. choosing the target function. Program for it to play for this checkers game, it needs to choose the best among legal moves. Obviously, every game has got some legal moves. You have to choose one among the legal move, but actually, because you want to win it, you have to choose the best among the legal. So we want our program to understand how to choose the best move among legal. Function choose move, which maps board state B to M. M is legal move. That is, it will give for each board state what are the different legal moves, right? Then we can easily write, depending upon board state, what are legal moves. We can identify the different legal moves which are possible as to take from a given board state and go to next board state, right? But from that, you have to identify which is the best legal move. Program has indirect training experience because it is learning by playing against itself. The target function program learns is, we want program to learn is V, which maps a board state to R value. So the target function is mapping from, which is V, maps from a given board state and R value. Basically, R value tells how much good is this a particular board state. R value is indicating how much good is a particular board state. The more positive it is, more a board state is having better value. Less positive it is, it's not a good move. It's not a good board state, right? How this is useful to play the game is that when you know different legal moves, suppose there are 4 legal moves from a state B1. From B1, you can make 4 possible legal moves. Okay, so let me call the next legal moves as C1, C2, C3, C4. So among C1, C2, C3, C4, which one is better? So find out what called the R values for C1, C2, C3, C4. Whichever is more positive, you choose that. That is, you are presently in B1 and you want to go as a next move, you want to go to one of the legal moves, either C1 or C2, C3 or C4. 4 moves are allowed. Now, depending upon R values, whichever is having higher value, suppose C3 has got higher value, you choose C3 as the next board state from B1. So this is the way in which we are going to use our target function, but this will be finding and telling about how good is a board state. Based upon that, you will be able to know you can play the game successfully by this mechanism. So we would like to have such a function. If you are having such a function, then you can be able to easily play the games against human players in the world checkers tournament. Okay, so we are interested in doing that, and so let us see how we can do. But this particular function V has to be learned. So let us see how we are going to learn through machine learning algorithm. If B is final state with win, then we assign V of B is equal to 100. So maximum if that R value can go to is plus 100, because if the B is final state and you have 1, that is the program has 1, then you give plus 100 for that board state. If B is final state with loss, then you give V of B is equal to minus 100. So you assign a negative value of minus 100. So the other board states, which are intermediate board states, will be between this plus 100 and minus 100, their R values. If B is a final state with draw, then V of B is given a value of 0. So you are given for V of B for victory 100, for loss minus 100, and for draw 0. And for other board states which are playing, they will be, the R values will be somewhere between plus 100 to minus 100. If B is not final state with win, then we would like to find out what is the final state which is going to reach, starting from B, playing optimally. So right now you're in B. Suppose you play optimally from there and reach a final state, which is called as B dash. And that is, you are able to go from B, the best final state possible is B of B dash, and is B dash, and B dash is the best final state you will be able to go. Then B of B dash is what is given as the value for B. But to find out, suppose this is B is not final state, you are going to use this strategy. From that place, if it's not final state, if you play optimally from then onwards, whether you're going to end up at win, loss, or draw, that value wanted to you 100, minus 100, or 0 to be. But this requires for you to understand how to play optimally from a given board state. Playing optimally from a given board state is very difficult, right? Even champions don't know that. Because they don't know that, they cannot win always. If you know playing optimally again, then you will always be world champion. So that is not possible. So this is a non-possible, non-operational definition of how to compute B of B for a B being a non-final state. So we want to put up a new strategy for doing this. So we are saying that B of B is not efficiently computable when B is not final state. So we give another definition, and that definition is we find operationally feasible target function, which I am defining as y cap of B. Y cap. So y cap is an operationally feasible target function, which we are going to define, right? So this operationally feasible target function should tell you about how good is a board state B when it is a non-final state, right? So choosing this target function for a board state, naturally you will see what is the status of which is there in that board. Suppose you're in board state, then it will be counting this following parameters: x1, x2, x3, x4, x5, and x6. x1 means number of black pieces. It sees this as one parameter. x2 is number of red pieces. Red pieces is opponent's pieces. x3 is number of black kings on the board. x4 is number of red kings on the board. And x5 is number of black pieces threatened by red. x6 is number of red pieces threatened by black. So you are seeing about black pieces, red pieces, black kings, red kings, and about in x5 and x6 threatening information of number of black pieces threatened by red and number of red pieces threatened by black. All these are telling about the information about a particular board state. So for example, if you don't know checkers, if you just think in terms of chess, so moment you lose your queen, you will know that you have become weakened, right? You weaken considerably because queen is gone. Suppose you lose some other thing like horse or elephant or something, and opponent is having the same pieces, and you are one down compared to opponent. Then you think that you are at a disadvantage with respect to these pieces compared to opponent. So for understanding about board state and giving it an appropriate value of R value, you should obviously count the status of the board. That is number of black pieces, number of red pieces, number of black kings, number of red kings, and threatening information. Right? Because threatening information will be changing as the game is progressing. So the target function which we are using to estimate the what called VCAP value for a B, which we are calling it as the V value of B, which we are calling it as YCAP of B, is having these parameters, and they are weighting them with the respective weights. W0 is there. It will be it is not having any parameter. It is a bias term. W1 will weight the X1 parameter, number of black pieces. W2 will give weightage to number of red pieces. W3 number of black kings. W4 number of the number of the red kings, and W5 and W6 will give weightage to the threatening information. So machine learning will be learning, and we have to store whatever we have learned somewhere, and that is what is stored in weights. The game is giving the number of the board state information, like number of black pieces, red pieces, black kings, red kings, and all that. Okay, so those things are weighted by these weights, and these weights are learned by the machine learning algorithm. This is a constant see in machine learning algorithms. We're always having weights, and these weights are unknown because they store learning information. As the game playing program is exposed to more amount of training examples, it learns from that particular training, and it has to, whatever it has to learn, it has to store somewhere, and that is stored in the weights. So basically the weights are learned, that's what we say. To learn, program needs training examples of the form B comma weight train of B. This is supervised learning. We require for every board state the B train of B value. So B train of B is required, but initially we have observed that B train of B is there only for the final state, where B is either a win, B is either a loss, or B is a draw. So what happens when the B is an intermediate state? B train of B for win is 100 plus 100. B train of B for loss, B is loss is minus 100. B train of B for B being draw is 0. But for non-final state, B being non-final state, how are we going to get values for B train of B? So far we are not having this B train of B. We are trying to make a proposal to get the value for B train of B, so that we can give training to our machine learning algorithm. To compute B train of B, if B's final state is easy, if B is not final state, then B train of B is defined as y cap of successor of B. We have just now defined y cap and seen its formula and what are its components. So we are saying that B train of B is not y cap of B, but y cap of successor of B. What is the successor of B? Where successor of B is the next board state for which it is the program's turn to move. For example, when the game playing program is playing, it plays for both players A and B. Assume that when it is the program player A's turn to move, the board state is B. Then machine learning program will make a move from the on behalf of player A, because both the from player A and player B, the machine learning program itself is playing, because it is playing against itself. Assume that initially that at some stage the board state is B, and it is player A's turn to move. So player A will move, that is machine learning program will make a move on behalf of player A, and the board state will change from B to B1 after the move. Then player B will turn it is. Again, game playing program will play on behalf of player B. From B1, the state will change to B2. So from B, where it was A's turn to move, at B1 it was B's turn to move, at B2 it is the next state, to which after the playing by B you come. So next state is B2. At B2 it is player's turn again to make move, right? So B2 is supposed to be the successor of B. Okay, that is the meaning of this successor of B. So if you are at state B and A moves it to B1, B moves and from B1 to B2, so B2 is successor of B. So B train of B is defined as y cap of successor of B, where a y cap formula is right now given to us, and they are weights which will be learned by the machine learning algorithm. right? So machine learning algorithm will be learning and adjusting the weights, and we are going to see how this is done in the next slide. So it has to monitor the error. Machine learning program, which is in fact we are calling that particular neural network as Adeline, and this Adeline will be observing the error, and the error is basically about is defined as sigma b comma b train of b belonging to training examples, b and b train of b belonging to training examples, each board state, and what is its b train of b. This is the for all board states the sigma is operated upon. That is for every training example it is operated upon. B train of b is defined as y cap of successor of b, and the right hand term is after minus is y cap of b. So this difference is between y cap of successor of b minus y cap of b whole square. So these are different. Y cap of successor of b and y cap of b both are different. So there is some, in fact, y cap of successor of b is supposed to be the successor of the b, as we have already seen, as we are already discussed with the example of from b you will be having board state of b2. If you had used the what call the game playing program, as I explained, that is from B you had made move to B1 on behalf of player A. From B1 you have moved to B2 on behalf of player B. So B2 is successor of B, as I told you. So both this B train of B, which is equal to y cap of successor of B and y cap of B are different. So there is a subtraction involving these two terms, and this is supposed to be error. This is squared, and if you square it, the positive terms or negative terms will which are showing error will be because of squaring, they all will become positive. Moment there is a deviation, if you don't square it, what happens is that positive term and negative term for the next training example may get cancelled. Even though there is error, you cannot detect it. So that's why you train it. That's why you square it. And we take this across different training examples to which the program is getting exposed to, right? And this is going to give error of our learning algorithm. And we would like to minimize this error. We would like to take it towards 0. In fact, we keep a small threshold, E less than 0.1, to conclude this training. That's what we will do. Fine. So let us see the algorithm for this Adeline. It is called as least mean square weight update rule. And so you are seeing this algorithm. But for each training example B comma B train of B, you are going to use the current weights of y cap of B. For each weight, Wi is equal to Wi plus mu. Mu is learning rate into V train of B minus V into V train of B minus can you remove this thing? Possible? Okay. Some part of the screen is blocked. Yeah. Yeah, next. So LMS weight update rule is visible to you. For each training example B comma B train of B, use the current weights of y cap of B. Y cap of B are given you the formula W0 plus W1 x1 plus W2 x2 like that up to W6 x6. So those weights, these weights will be initially initialized to some random values. As the learning proceeds, these weights will be getting updated. And how the updation is done? WA will get a new value of WA, which is equal to WA plus mu, learning rate, B minus B cap of minus Y cap of B. Okay. So V train of B is y cap of successor of B, and the other one is y cap of B into xi. So this is calculated by using our learning function y cap of B, and whatever weight change that you are getting it after the right hand component, after mu and all that, that is the weight change, will be added to the previous weight. The weights are initially randomly initialized. Later on, this learning will be proceeding as the game is played by the machine learning program against itself. This training will be proceeding, and you will be monitoring the error until the error comes to less than 0.1. Until that time, you will be scanning across training examples, that is new board states, and you will be calculating and updating the weight changes, and you will be making the machine learning algorithm learn how to play checkers with improved performance, right? So this the way the Adeline is used to play this particular game of checkers, which we have discussed. So the game playing programs, they have in fact, this particular program, this particular algorithm has been implemented by our students for many years in our labs, and they are able to demonstrate the learning. The program is able to what call gather by using this particular algorithm, and the program will be by learning to play against itself. It will be able to show its learning ability when actually playing with a human player later on. When you're testing it, once the training is over, you have to test it. Then you ask it to play with a human player. Then it will show what it has learned, whatever knowledge that it has learned. It will be able to demonstrate by playing intelligently against a human being. So this is one application of the machine learning where we have focused our machine learning algorithm to play a game uh, with learning and with intelligence. Intelligence, of course, here the activity is learning, right? So why we concentrate upon the gameplay? What is the use of that? This is one way we can demonstrate about the learning, right? Machine learning algorithms capacity to do learning on a particular task. So this particular algorithm has also been used by some of our students, BTech students in the projects, etc., where they use this Adeline's LMS weight learning tool, LMS learning rule or Adeline's rule, learning rule. They used it for some applications, like computer networks and so on and so forth in past. Okay, so is there a break or we continue? Huh? Huh? We can give a 5-minute break. Huh? So we can give a few minutes break, and we'll meet about after 10 minutes, right?
Yeah, Santosh sir, am I audible? Kishore?
Hello, sir.
Sir, Santosh sir,
Hello.
am I audible?
Yes, sir, you are
Sir,
audible.
Yeah. It's a small request to all the participants. Actually, I'm getting many calls from organizing committee that many people are not logging with their NIT ID. So please, it's a request that please log in with your ID, or else the organizers, I mean the people who are organizing the event, they will disconnect you from the meeting. Okay, so if please, I have already provided meeting IDs. Please go through the meeting ID and please try to change your meeting, display name to the meeting ID. Chandraha sir, Ramakrishna, Ramachandraya, Kumaraswamy sir, please, because again and again they are reminding me, but still, Sriram sir, Shankar Rao sir, Shaman ma'am, T Shanti. So please, it's again a humble request that please change your IDs to display name to IDs, or else again you will not be considered in the attendance. Okay, so please take care. Again and again, it's a request.
And one more thing, sir, you
sir,
please.
any questions are there? Please post it in the chat box.
Yeah.
We'll address after the break.
Tell me.
And maximum try to mute everyone, sir, because due to that some disturbances will coming, sir. Otherwise, you only who is hosting that, the host people can mute to everyone and give permission to only one person, sir, who is talking on that day. And if anyone is asking the question, then they will unmute and they will speak out, sir.
Yeah, that's what actually we have already communicated this. If you have any doubt, it's better we go through the chart, because we have given instructions to the presenters, speakers, that if any doubt is there, you can post in the doubt, they will clarify your doubts. Because every time as an organizers, every time what we are doing is every time you are muting, but still it will be from your end. Okay, every time it is making us in a fraction of seconds we have to mute it, but sometimes it happens. So please, it's a request to the participants, try to mute yourself also.
But most of them are just unmuting, sir. That is why due to that the bandwidth also very consumed, sir. More bandwidth is required for that meeting.
Yes. That should be given from others also, sir. We are trying our best, but it happens, right? Please, it's a request to all the participants. Please, when session is going on, mute yourself. And even see after this many requests also, we can see people without ID. Because with ID only your attendance will be recorded. Attendance recording will be done automatically in the GoToMeeting. Okay, so please, it's again a request. Please, that's the reason we have given 10 minutes of break, or else it will not be. We are getting calls from K4U saying that many people are there without ID. So please take care. At the end of the day, if attendance is not matching, we will not be responsible. So that's the reason even we have to give a break in the between. Okay. We don't want to disturb you in the sessions. That's the reason we have given 10 minutes break. So please, it's again a humble request to all the participants to change your display name, or else they will be simply what to call it as dismissing you again and again. Any number of times you log in also, they will dismiss you from the meeting. So please make yourself comfortable. Shravan sir, I can see few of them right now. Sir, please, it's a request, please. B Dhanam, please, it's a request. Caller 21, please, it's a request. 22 also request. 23 request.
But I observed that the maximum 120 or 125 participants are presented, sir, both in session 1 and session 2. It is not crossing more than 130.
Yeah, but according to the registration, we are crossing 170.
Yes, sir. That is what I have observed in the day 1 and now also. That is not crossing more than 130. It is not going to reach
130.
up to 130.
Yes. Today we have seen 143, but let's see, sir. Anyway, see, even though if you come or don't come, the problem is if you don't maintain attendance greater than 80, at the end of the day, we will not be getting certificate. So it's to the participants. It's not that we call every time and say, sir, please join the meeting and all the stuff. Because AICT has given strict rules that if you have attendance greater than 80 and marks in the examination greater than 60, then only you are eligible to receive your certificate. Okay. So please, again and again, I am requesting you, Nirmala ma'am, please. Dhana ma'am, please. Again, see, this many times we are still requesting, we are facing problem. It's up to the participants. I just want to remind you. That's the reason I was just reminding you. Shankar Rao sir, please. Stravan sir, please. Shanti ma'am, please. Ramya ma'am, please. Santosh sir.
I request participants, if you have any doubts, you can keep it in the chat. We take the questions at the last. The session is going to start now.
So now we are not going to have section. No?
No.
So now we are going to start about the perceptron. And this perceptron is one of the known as the first neural network which has been invented. And its invention was done way back in 1959 by a scientist called as Rosenblatt. And so perceptron is having some interesting behavior and interesting properties. And Rosenblatt has invented this, as I said, somewhere at about 1959. And he has brought this, and he has anticipated that it will be playing a great role ahead in the field of computing to do the task of classification. So let us see this perceptron, how it is what called designed, what is its learning algorithm, how it behaves, how it is going to work. And also we'll try to understand what is its limitation, because no longer we are using perceptron. It is the very first type of neural network. So what was its limitation? We'll discuss. In fact, when perceptron is invented by Rosenblatt, he predicted a very rosy future using this type of perceptrons. And he predicted that he thought that it will do great wonders in the area of this machine learning. And what happened was that this particular perceptron was analyzed by two professors from MIT, whose names are Minsky and Peppert. They said that perceptron is not useful. It cannot be able to do classification even for an XOR gate. So that's what they have studied this perceptron's behavior, observed its fault, what it cannot do. And they have explained, and they are told that therefore, because it cannot classify even XOR gate, it won't be useful. So it is useless. That's what this that's what they have said about this Rosenblatt's invention, perceptron. These two scientists from MIT. So at that time, the research was more focused on symbolic AI. Symbolic AI means they used to concentrate upon building intelligent systems with programs. So whatever languages they used to have at that time, with that, they wanted to demonstrate intelligence, right? So they were not using this type of what called networks, like neural networks, they are not using. So that was symbolic AI. Perceptron comes under a different field of AI called as connectionist AI. Connectionist AI means where they use neurons and build up an intelligent system, learning system. And so perceptrons belong to a different group with different part of AI called as connectionist AI. Whereas those two people were experts from symbolic AI group. And so Rosenblatt's machine's fault was correctly identified by these two scientists from MIT called Minsky and Peppert. And this was, as said, in 1959-60. They written a book also about those Minsky and Peppert, saying about what the perceptron cannot do and why it is not useful. So they also advised that neural networks are therefore not useful. That's what they had stated their opinion, Minsky and Peppert. So because they are from MIT and they are recognized scientists all over the world, the neural networks researchers, scientists, have not started taking interest on neural networks after the perceptron's failure. So for almost for 10 to 15 years, not much research was done. Funding to research using these neural networks was stopped or reduced, and therefore research in these neural networks was not going. Then, as I said, this was in 1960, around 1960. Later on in 1985, the three authors with the names of Rumelhart and the Hinton and one more scientist, they have developed a backpropagation learning algorithm. So this backpropagation learning algorithm is a landmark algorithm which is even used today. In fact, it is the basis of deep learning. Backpropagation learning algorithm is heart of the neural networks even today. So that is an advancement of this perceptron. It is having more different architecture. It has got a different learning algorithm. But let us see first. So even today we are using backpropagation learning algorithm, and one of that inventors is Hinton. Is still involved in the research of deep learning. In fact, is in the Google Mind, Geoffrey Hinton, and still active in research. The inventor of the backpropagation learning algorithm in 1985. So they have demonstrated the effectiveness of the backpropagation learning algorithm with their concept of neural network called as multi-layer perceptrons. And we are now focusing upon the previous invention, that is perceptron, in today's class. So the perceptron, let us see what sort of architecture it is having, what sort of behavior it is having. So let us see the formula of this perceptron. Even before that, we can see the diagram, how it looks. This is the way in which it looks. It has got n inputs, x1 to xn. One input x0 is permanently grounded at 1. And there are weights connecting these inputs to a summer, sigma is summer. And the weights are labeled W0, W1, W2 like that to Wn. corresponding to inputs x0 to xn. And the summer will give the weighted sum of this inputs, that is sigma wxi. It will compute from I will vary from 0 to n, and that is output of the summer. That is given to an activation function called as the Sinum activation function, and the output of the perceptron is after Sinum. That perceptron, it will produce a 1 or -1 output after Sinum. After Sinum. Okay, so we are going to see about the functioning of this particular perceptron. So let us see how it functions, how the outputs are connected to, how the output is generated. So these are perceptrons and these ANNs. These are all called artificial neural networks, because the real neural networks are in our human brain. And artificial neural networks these are motivated from the biological neural systems which we are having in our brain, human brains. And so ANNs are a motivated version of these neurons which are present in human brains. And perceptron is one such example of a artificial neural network. The output O will be either +1 or -1, as I said. If output O will be +1 if weighted sum is greater than 0. Else, if weighted sum is less than or equal to 0, output will be -1. It uses an activation function called a Sinum function, which I am designating as SGN. SGN of y is equal to 1 if y is greater than 0, else -1. What is y? Y is the weighted sum. So if weighted sum is given to SGN function as input, then if the y is positive, then SGNY will be +1. If y is negative or equal to 0, SGNY will be -1. So the output of the perceptron is defined by this formula. So basically, we are going to use this +1 and -1 to indicate two different classes. So if input belongs to one class, we would like to put the positive class. Two classes are there. One class we will say +1. Other class, if there are two classes, other class will label it with -1. So we wanted to use it for classification by using the perceptron. So we already seen this diagram of the perceptron's internal architecture, how it works. Then what it does, it classifies. Suppose we are having information belonging to the two dimensions x1 and x2, right? X0 is anyway always 1, so we don't show it on the plot. So x1 and x2 are there. So these are the input points, and there are some positive points are there on this x1 x2 plane. There are some negative points are there. So classification means you wanted to separate these two groups belong to two different classes, plus and minus. So that is classification. Then here it is perceptron will be generating a line, and that line is separating the positive points and negative points in this plot. So like this, perceptron will generate a separator line, and we'll see the equation of the separator line, what it is shortly in the next few slides, right? So perceptron will be getting that separator line, through its implementation. It creates that separator line, and it basically separates the points belonging to two classes and with a straight line. So this is a two-dimensional plot. So perceptron therefore separates with a straight line. Suppose we're having one more dimension, x1, x2, and x3. Now we are having 3 dimensions. So how is perceptron therefore will separate these two classes, positive and negative classes, by a plane, this is kind, right? When we are having a three-dimensional input data, then we have to separate with a plane. Then, in fact, we call this equation of separation surface, whatever we are having, plane is separation surface. In the case two-dimensional, straight line is a separation surface, right? So we call this particular thing separating plane as a hyperplane. So perceptron will produce a hyperplane which separates positive points and negative points and classifies the input as belonging to a test input as belonging to either positive class or negative class. It also uses supervised learning, and given after supervised learning, during supervised learning we'll give training examples of both positive examples and negative examples. From that it learns, and later on when you give a test example which it has not seen, then it will tell whether the test example belongs to positive class or negative class. This way the perceptron will be behaving, right? So let us see about how the perceptron, some more details about perceptron classification. Perceptron outputs +1 for one side of points on one side of hyperplane. It outputs -1 for points on the other side of hyperplane. So hyperplane is the separation surface which is connecting the positive set of points from the negative, which is separating from the other set of points, negative set of points. So hyperplane will be separating these two classes. And the equation, as I said, that I'll be telling about this hyperplane's equation. So the equation of this hyperplane or Dacian surface is sigma wxy is equal to 0. So weighted sum, if you equate it to 0, that will give the separation surface between positive class and negative class. Of course, this W0 to Wn has to be learned by supervised learning. They will be initialized to some random values in the beginning, and by supervised learning, you have to learn these weights W0 to Wn, right? By using perceptron learning algorithm, which we are going to discuss next, right? So this separation surface, which is called hyperplane, is given by this. Its formula is given here. The equation of Dacian surface is given. Perceptron can solve linearly separable problems. So linearly separable problems means, suppose you plot, say, an AND gate on the two-dimensional surface of x1, x2 like that. Suppose you plot, then for AND gate you will be getting, for 0, 0 input, you will be getting the output as AND gate output is 0, which will be coded by perceptron as -1. For 0, 1, the perceptron output will be -1 because it will code 0 as -1. Then for 1, 0 also perceptron output is -1. And for 1, 1 input of AND gate, it will show +1 output. So this is where it can be able to classify an AND gate, two input AND gate. OR gate, it uses a different truth table, so you can be able to easily draw. For example, let us discuss about OR gate. For 0, 0, it is going to be -1 in the case of OR gate. For 0, 1, you have to get, OR gate will give 1. So the output will be positive class. Then for 1, 0, again the perceptron will display 1 as output, and for 1, 1 it will display 1. So this positive set of points, if you plot these things, you can be able to easily separate that for the case of this OR gate, that 0 from the rest of the 3 points. Suppose we are having these 4 trading points, 0, 0, 0, 1, 1, 0, and 1, 1. So you can be able to draw a line separating. This is a two-dimensional problem. Only two-dimensional are there, x1 and x2, and output is the perceptron output, which is O, and we are saying O is +1 for 3 points and for For one origin point, it is -1. So a line can be easily be drawn. So our line, the weights will be, in fact, infinite number of lines can be there. So you can draw infinite number of lines separating these 3 positive points from 1 negative points, right? Because so that the perceptron can solve, as you're able to see, a straight line is drawn in this case. So it can solve linearly separable problems. Suppose you try to solve XOR problem. For 0, 0, you have to give, you will get -1. For 0, 1, you will get +1 for XOR. For 1, 0, you will get +1. For 1, 1, you will get -1. Now, suppose you try to draw a straight line separating, if you plot these things on x1, x2 plane, suppose you try to draw a straight line, you'll find that it's not possible. Because XOR is requiring nonlinear separation, not a linear separation. Whereas perceptron can only solve linearly separable problems. That is the reason why you are not able to solve XOR gate classification by using perceptron. This is what those Minsky and Peppert has told. That is, perceptron cannot solve non-linearly separable problems. Therefore, it is not useful. Yeah, it cannot solve non-linearly separable problems, but it is useful for linearly separable problems. So then we'll discuss what happens, suppose you written a perceptron program. What happens when you give a XOR problem? What perceptron will try to do about it? We'll discuss that. I'll discuss that context. Okay, so let us see the perceptron training algorithm. Perceptron training algorithm. So perceptron will be using this training algorithm, initialize weights and learning rate. And learning rate is a value between 0 and 1. In the case of Adalian, I call it as mu. Okay, usually books either will be using a symbol called eta, which looks like n. It's called eta, and that is learning rate. It will be value between 0 and 1. Normally, I ask my students to keep a learning rate value of 0.2 or 0.3. Let's keep it low, because when you keep it low, it learns slowly but accurately. When you take increase the learning rate, it will try to learn faster. So sometimes you may not get a very good solution when you use a higher learning rate. So it's you have to keep the learning rate between 0 and 1. You can keep it normally low value, so that you can be able to go to your correct solution where error is close to 0, without any difficulty. Then this perceptron training algorithm is showing that repeat until stopping criterion of error is equal to 0. This is one of the characteristics of perceptron. In the case of Adalian, I said error should be less than 0.1. That is the normal criteria which I ask my students to do in our labs for Adalian. But in the case of perceptron, you are saying that error is equal to 0. So why you are saying the error is equal to 0 is that perceptron, if it solves, it will give 0 error. If it cannot solve, it cannot solve. Simply, it cannot solve. You don't have to worry about error because it cannot solve at all. Right? For example, XOR it cannot solve. I'll tell you exactly in a moment what happens when you try with an XOR problem. Right? Let us see the rest of the algorithm. For each training example, there is a nested loop for each WI weight input. Delta WI is calculated as mu learning rate, T target output, minus O observed output. O is the output obtained by the perceptron. T is the target, whatever it is there. For example, target output for a OR gate is, for 0, 0 it is -1. For 0, 1 it is +1. For 1, 0 it is +1. For 1, 1 it is +1. So these are target outputs. Observed output is what it is actually calculating by the perceptron. So when T and O differ, there is an error, right? So you want to decrease that error by this weight change. So you're calculating t minus o and multiplying with learning rate and xi. Xi is whatever is the input that you are looking at. In the case of this OR gate, xi I value will vary between 0 to 2 because 2 input OR gate, right? x0, x1, x2. So each will have corresponding weight change, delta wi, delta w0, delta w1, delta w2. So all these three things in the second for loop is computing, right? For each training example, you are computing all three weight changes and you are adding it to the respective weights, these weight changes. And this way you are proceeding with respect to your training until error becomes 0. So perceptron, when it tries to solve the OR gate, AND gate, and so on and so forth, NOR gate and NAND gate, so on and so forth, they're all solvable. They're linearly separable problems. The perceptron can solve it and it will terminate with an error is equal to 0. So if this is a very simple code. The algorithm is very simple. You can easily code it. So suppose I ask my students to implement this for XOR to see what happens. Obviously, it cannot solve it because it will be trying to make error is equal to 0, which is not possible. So, but it doesn't know that it cannot solve the perceptron algorithm. So it will be keeping on changing weights and trying to put new weights and see whether it can be able to make error is equal to 0. So it is not possible. So ultimately, you will observe the behavior of perceptron program will be having an infinite loop, right? It will be searching for weights and not able to make error is equal to 0. So it can't solve XOR problem, but linearly separable problems it can solve. Why it cannot solve XOR problem is because perceptron cannot, the hyperplane that it is generating will not be complex enough to separate a non-linearly separable problem like XOR. It requires a curved line, whereas XOR has the power to produce a straight line in 2 dimensions. When you require a curved line, XOR, the perceptron cannot be able to produce such a type of decision surface. So that's the reason it was not able to solve this particular problem. So you can ask while doing this, teaching this perceptron to guess weights for OR gate, AND gate, etc. Right? As I said, there are infinite infinite number of lines separating OR gates and AND gates. You can solve it easily. Infinite number of solutions are there. You can guess some of these weights, right? Without actually running the algorithm, you can guess weights. The whatever weights you guess should be satisfying all 4 training examples, because you're having truth table for OR gate of 4 training examples, 0, 0 to 1, 1, right? Similarly, for AND gate also you're having 4 training examples. So you can solve these things by your guesswork and see whether you're able to correctly classify. Of course, for machine learning, we are going to use a learning algorithm like this perceptron. We are going to initialize randomly the weights and then make the program learn by using this learning algorithm the correct weights, right? So it will, after making some iterations, it will come up with correct weights, the machine learning algorithm. Fine. So we have just now completed the perceptron, and so here I have shown the NOR gate. This is one statement of one problem. X1, X2. The truth table is 0, 0, 0, 1, 1, 0, 1, 1. What are its respective? This is an OR gate. What are its respective output values? So you are able to see for 0, 0, you are getting target value of +1. For other inputs, you are getting a target value of -1. So now we have completed 2 topics. One is the machine learning application by using Adaline. And second thing is we have discussed about perceptron. Maybe I think now we should take some questions. in liver. Mana message. Any questions? You can now ask any questions through chat. I will clarify them. Question from Shivaranjani. How initial weights affect the target values? Fine. This is a good question. How you choose initial weights? Weights are chosen with small random values. Normally, you keep some positive random values between 0 and some positive value. Right? Small values you will keep normally. Right? Say 0 to 3, 0 to 2, like that. And you can choose, these are real numbers. So you can choose among these weights, low numbers, positive values as weights, you give it. And you have no idea where exactly is the solution. So normally you take up this positive values and you go from here towards the solution. And in the case of this target value is the final weights. When the weights are stabilized after learning, you get target values. So you have to make some random start, but keep weights in the small positive values, say between 0 to 3. For my suggestion, I give 0 to 3. You take any real number between this, take random number generator, generate some weights between 0 to 3, and put it across in different weights. That's what I suggest. Right? So you don't have idea. This is because they're all between 0 and 3. So you are virtually starting at different values of this window given to weights. So that is the that answers your question. Then what is the role of W0? That is the next question from the participant. So W0 is basically you are keeping it as some kind of a bias. So it's always grounded. That means it is not having any input parameter given to it. So it's always 1. So keep it there. So it basically, if you keep it at 1, depending upon W0 being positive or negative, it affects the weighted sum. Suppose it's positive, it's taking up the weighted sum. If it's negative, it is taking down the weighted sum. So it is used in the neural networks as a bias term. Then the next question is, does weight values will affect number of iterations? Yeah. The weight values, for example, we have not discussed today what is known as the backpropagation algorithm, which is a very, what shall I call, very powerful algorithm, backpropagation algorithm. It is a fundamental to neural networks. Neural networks are very much important in machine learning. They are very powerful. The neural networks which are offered by backpropagation algorithm, supported by backpropagation algorithm, they are very powerful. And we are definitely knowing about how, for example, there is a concept in the case of the this one, error surface. This is based upon a concept of hill climbing. This gradient descent is supposed to be a negative hill you are climbing, or you are climbing down. Okay, normally you climb the hill up, whereas in the case of gradient descent, you go across a negative hill to its bottom part. So that is maximization when you go to a positive hill, positive part of the highest part of the hill. When you are now going to the minimum because you are trying to minimize. So maximization and minimization essentially are not much different. They are going to different by a sign. They are going to be just differed by a sign. If you multiply by -1, a maximization problem will become a minimization problem. Fine. So the gradient descent will be trying to take it to the minimal surface, right? Suppose when you are going down the hill to its minimum surface, right? You go down to you have seen some, let us see it from a different perspective. Suppose you wanted to climb some what call peak like Mount Everest or something, right? So it is not a single hill. While climbing Mount Everest, you have to cross a number of hills on the way, right? You are brought to Himalayas and left there. So while you have to go down to some top of a local peak and then make a downward journey. Then again you have to climb the next mountain and there may be peak. Okay, so this first peak that you encountered, it's called local maxima. Whereas global maxima is say like Mount Everest peak. There may be a number of such local minimas, local maximas. Because we are speaking about gradient descent, we are talking about downward hills. There the concept is called local minima. Whereas global minimum is having least error because it is bottommost. It goes still down. Error is still less there. Whereas on the while doing this gradient descent, you may come across this local minima. So your question, does weight values will affect the number of iterations? Yes. If you are getting stuck in local minima, then gradient descent says always take a step in the direction of lesser error. But if you come across local minima, how do you, when you take a step, you are increasing the error because you cannot go to the next downward part of the hill unless you climb up. So that's the reason the initialization will make a difference. If you choose different initial values, then you may avoid this local minima, right? You may fall on a surface which is leading to global minima, right? Your starting point. Then you will not encounter local minima, right? So that is the that is the answer for your question. So if you are getting local minima, what you should do? Reinitialize weights and run the algorithm again. This time we may avoid the local minima and go to global minima. In fact, the backpropagation neural networks, which are not discussed, which is the next part of this particular subject of neural networks, is having the property that you can avoid this what called local minima because there are so many weights, right? There are so many weights are there. There are so many pathways on which you can be able to make journey. So it makes more tolerant towards the occurrence of local minima. That is, it avoids. It finds a path for you to. If you are not able to go across in one direction, if you go across in that direction, you may find because these multi dimensions are there, weights. So in some dimensions, you will always be going downwards with respect to error. So that is, it's not that much subject to local minima because of this thing. But however, initial points of initialization will make a difference. And if you make a correct initialization, it will take you towards solution more quickly. Okay, next question is, what is validation test? Now, as I said, supervised learning will have these training examples based on which it is learning. And how do you know whether it works? After learning, you are stopping. When are you stopping? When error is less than say 0.1. Then afterwards, it is now ready for training is over. It is ready for exam. That's called validation test. In validation test, you give an input example only. Don't give output. It will predict correct class for that particular input example. So that is validation test. But to validate, you should know the correct answer. That is for which the class is already known to you, but which you are not given for training, that you are keeping in validation set. From validation set, you are going to pick up a input-output pair. Give input. See whether it matches. It has got output also in validation set. See whether the output predicted by the neural network matches what is given as answer in the validation set, as output in the validation set. If both are matching, the validation test is successful. So that is about validation. Validation is checking whether outputs produced by inputs in the test sequence is correct. So what the one more question from Sivaranjani. Adeline is used to observe error and neural network is to minimize error. What is the difference between Adeline and neural network? Adeline, whatever I have discussed, is a variation of perceptron. I just now shown you perceptron, and the Adeline is just a variation of that. So, I'm just taking you to the perceptrons diagram. If you remove the SGN function and connect it with a straight line, you get Adeline. So Adeline will have y is equal to, sorry, z is, suppose z is the output of Adeline, z is equal to y, whereas y is equal to sigma wxi. So Adeline will simply pass the weighted input directly above. That is Adeline. Whereas perceptron will give it to an activation function of sin m. Whereas Adeline will not give it, will pass it as a, with pass it a linear function, where z is the same as y. Y is the weighted sum. Yeah. So that is the difference between Adeline and neural network. In the case of neural network, we are having more different architecture, also multi-layer perceptrons, which we have not discussed, which uses neurons which are having this. Neurons will have two components, each neuron. One is summer and other is activation function. In the case of MLP or multi-layer perceptrons, the activation function will be the sigmoid function, right? Sigmoid function will be there. In the case of perceptron, it is SGN. In the case of Adeline, it is linear function, z is equal to y. In the case of the multi-layer perceptron, each perceptron which is there in hidden layer or in the output layer will have activation function as sigmoid. So that is the difference between Adeline and the neural network. Next question is, what is the difference between XOR and NOR perceptron? The perceptron will be same, but XOR and NOR are different data which is given to this thing, different problems which you are asking the perceptron to solve it. Whereas NOR problem, perceptron can solve it, XOR it cannot solve it. So XOR and NOR are simply input data to the perceptron. Next question is, how to validate machine learning, deep learning projects? What is the benchmarks? And consider the classification example. Final accuracy depends upon training, input images and many factors. How to prove it is accurate and how to compare with other works? Because data sets may be different and number of images considered may be different for training and testing. Yeah. See, normally when you're doing research, so I take it that you're doing some research to validate some algorithm, machine learning algorithm. So if there are previous research in that particular area, you have to compare with that previous research with the same data set as what he has used. You are also have to check it. Then only you can be able to compare it. So suppose they are using some data set from the machine learning repository. You say machine learning repository. The same data set you should also use in your work, right? And make a comparison so that you can say that your learning algorithm is functioning better than theirs. So this is the previous work is benchmark for you, and you are going to compare with that your work and see and see what advantages you are getting because of using your algorithm. Okay, if data sets are different, then obviously comparison is not possible. In that case, you have to implement their work also. Suppose you are used for some reason that data set, whatever they are used is not available to you, suppose. Then obviously you can't use the same data set to compare because it's not available to you. So you have to code with a different data set, their algorithm, whatever they are told, and your algorithm you are taking with the data, with your own data set, which you are using it for the other system also, and make a comparison. Data set should always be same when you are making a comparison across algorithms. That's the way to do it. In the situation that where the data set which the related research, previous research has used is not accessible to you, right? So that's about the answer to your question. Then any algorithm for non-linearable separable gates like XOR gates. Yeah, we are Adeline can be able to solve this one, and Adeline can be able to solve the what called non-linear separable problems also. It is not so efficient. It takes more time, but MLPs are very good at non-linear separable problems. MLPs like multi-layer neural networks. It is very quite powerful networks. And to tell you how powerful they can be able to implement any function to whatever accuracy, however complicated the function may be, you can be able to implement it on a neural network. You can model it with a neural network with whatever accuracy you want. You have to choose the right architecture for that particular neural network, which you can develop expertise by working on it. Right? So it's such powerful, the neural networks. They're also fault tolerant neural networks. So, so non-irreducible problems very easily you can be able to solve it by using NLP. Okay. So that answers the questions which are shown on the chat. So I thank you for the opportunity of having discussing with you about these areas, 2 areas of neural networks. The one is an Adeline application, which we use with Adeline for a machine learning application, and we also discuss perceptron. Thank you. Good luck.
Hello, Professor.
Yes.